Season 2 of the One Piece live action just came out, and while I'm pleased to say that the show is still definitely enjoyable, I cannot help but feel that this season was an opportunity for the show to take a leap, from a fun but very rough around the edges production to a genuinely great TV show. And I think that it missed the opportunity to take that leap. There are some improvements in my opinion, such as the overarching plot and the pacing, and there is one shining episode in particular that I will be giving its due flowers in this review, but overall the show still feels just as unpolished as Season 1 and actually a bit more unpolished in some areas. In my Season 1 review, I mostly looked past some of the messier aspects of the show because of the sheer joy that I felt seeing my favorite story being brought to life for the first time. But with Season 2, that initial novelty has worn off, so I will be reviewing this show through the same lens that I would any other show that was not One Piece. This will be almost completely spoiler-free from talking about the manga and the anime, so you can watch this review even if you've only ever seen the Netflix adaptation. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. And what if I told you that it could be easy to get in shape? Most people struggle to stay in shape because it's hard to stick to a healthy diet. After all, healthy food usually doesn't taste that good, and it's a pain to always meal prep and cook. That's why Factor puts your healthy eating on autopilot, with meals that actually taste good. Factor is a meal delivery service prepared by nutritionists and professional chefs, meaning you don't have to plan your meals every week, you don't have to shop for ingredients, and you don't have to waste time cooking. But the best part is that Factor food also tastes really good, like restaurant quality. It does not feel like you're having to eat healthy. And Factor even lets you know which meals are calorie smart, keto, vegetarian, protein plus, and so on. So bottom line is that getting in shape is just really easy with Factor. Just select your meal plan and then they'll keep sending delicious, healthy meals straight to your door. And if you want to try out Factor right now, you will actually get free breakfast for a year. That's right, just head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code MORGEFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That's code MORGEFB50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. So here is where I think Season 2's biggest strength lies. The plot is genuinely very strong, and it's a lot tighter than Season 1's. Season 1's plot was essentially a villain of the week storyline, with the additional Garp and Kobe B-plot taking up time. That was, in my opinion, the weakest aspect of Season 1's storytelling. And due to the tight pacing, some of the aspects of Season 1 felt a little bit rushed, particularly the entire conflict with Arlong at the end. However, Season 2 creates this great overarching narrative of defeating Baroque Works, with Baroque Works literally kicking off the first scene of the first episode. And Baroque Works becomes this common thread that weaves together every single plot point of the season, from meeting Laboon to Whiskey Peak to Little Garden and even to Drum Kingdom. And the manner in which this plot builds is phenomenally paced out, because we start out with just mentions of Baroque Works, then we encounter them inside Laboon and they don't seem like a serious problem, but then in Whiskey Peak we get a full-on battle with them, and here's where things really start to come together, because unlike in the original manga, Whiskey Peak actually properly establishes Baroque Works as a real threat. Zoro defeating the 100 bounty hunters feels like a genuine challenge here. And then the Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day duo is not actually defeated here in Whiskey Peak. The Straw Hats actually have to run away from them there. So this creates this building sense of threat, where it's like, okay, the lower agents can be dealt with, but they're not pushovers. And by the time we're reaching the number 5 pair, they're already villains that are comparable to the main villains from East Blue. So how strong then is this Mr. Zero guy? And that really hits home with Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week, because Little Garden truly becomes a nightmare for the Straw Hats in the live action, where it genuinely feels at some points like both Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week's abilities are borderline unfair. They are a significantly tougher challenge in this arc than they were in the source material, and the crew nearly breaks in this arc. And again, seeing the crew in this state against just Mr. 3 only builds further anticipation to the enigmatic Mr. Zero. And the cherry on top of all this is of course Miss All Sunday, the mysterious omnipresent figure shadowing the Straw Hats at every turn, pulling all the strings and and even orchestrating the final battle at Drum Kingdom. The incorporation of Baroque works as legitimate threats from start to finish that tie together the entire plot of the season gives a sense of cohesion to the narrative. And the fact that throughout all this we don't even get to the strongest members of Baroque works, with that being saved for next season, sets up a tremendous sense of anticipation for Alabasta. The pacing of this season also gives us a lot of time to build the bond between the Straw Hats and Vivi, so that once we get to Alabasta in season 3, all stops can be pulled out. The emotional sense of urgency to help Vivi and her nation will be deeply ingrained in the viewer by that point, and the sense of stakes of taking on this organization that the Straw Hats have been struggling against uphill for so long will hit even harder than it did in the manga. So the overarching plot of this season I consider to be damn near perfect, with the one exception actually being the one episode at the start of the season that I think was genuinely straight up bad: Loguetown. Not just because it didn't really have anything to do with the Baroque works plot, but because it really had no real plot in general. It was just a messy, standalone episode with very little narrative flow or direction. It was just sort of a series of events that had to be checked off before we entered the Grand Line. But we will save that for some of the more specific writing issues I had with this season in a future section, because next up we have another one of the season's biggest strengths. So the core cast remains phenomenal, and it's a little frustrating because I feel like the season almost gets away with a little amateurish scene direction at points, which I will be addressing later in this review, thanks to the actors just bringing such charismatic performances to the table that really carry certain scenes. So a quick recap of our main characters: Iñaki Godoy, someone needs to double or triple his salary. The only reason, and I mean the only reason, that the show works as well as it does is because of him. Because he is able to sell us on such an unapologetically enthusiastic and giddy personality. Because he is willing to go big with his choices as an actor in every single scene. Not caring if it feels grounded or real, only caring if it is fun and entertaining. That makes the otherwise ridiculously campy world feel a little more palatable, because it's centered around a character who feels like a cartoon brought to life himself. Beyond that, I'd say Makanyu as Zoro continues to be awesome. For a character so stoic and serious, he is insanely likable, and really funny. He has a great handle on comedic timing and delivery. He has probably the most laugh-out-loud lines for me this season, but he also brings a very real intensity, especially to his fight scenes, that is really important in this show in particular to help balance the tone from becoming too silly at points. Jacob Romero Gibson is the breakout star of the Straw Hats for me this season. I initially felt like he was the weakest Straw Hat and weakest Straw Hat casting choice in the first season, but I love his performance here. He got so much more to work with. He really stole the show in Little Garden, and I imagine a lot of viewers who are new to One Piece may come away from this season with Usopp as their favorite character. I also feel like Jacob Romero Gibson was just given less funny jokes in season 1. In season 2, he made me laugh a good deal. I think he's got a good flow going with his character. Taz Skylar's Sanji is probably the most different from the source material character. Like, it's basically a completely different character. But Taz's version of Sanji is genuinely smooth, charming, and very easygoing and likable in every scene. He feels very natural in that role. I wish he had more to do this season, but Alabasta should make up for that. And lastly, Emily Rudd as Nami. I really praised her a lot in season 1. She's obviously a great actress, but I actually don't like the writing for her in season 2, and how she's made to play the character here. So Nami in the live action is very stoic and serious like Zoro. But the difference is that Zoro isn't actually written to be mean to any of his crewmates, besides Sanji, who he has a rivalry with. But for some reason, Nami in this show is written to be kind of mean to her crewmates for no reason here. Now in the manga, yes, Nami snaps at or blows up at her crew in moments, but those instances are actually usually warranted because the crew is going too far being overly stupid or overly obnoxious. That's when Nami snaps in the manga. Otherwise, her default state is usually to be friendly and get along with her other crewmates. Whereas here in the live action, it's almost like Nami's default is to be sullen and mean to her crew for no reason. Like, there are scenes where someone will ask her a perfectly reasonable question, like, "Hey Nami, why are we sailing here?" And she will respond by treating them like shit for asking a perfectly reasonable question. Now, I thought that combativeness worked well in Season 1 when they were all complete strangers with hard pasts, coming together and slowly learning to trust one another. But now in Season 2, when they've all become a family, I feel like some of that unwarranted meanness could be toned down just a little bit. On the flip side, holy shit, Charitra Chandran as Vivi is so good. Her shift in personality from when we're first introduced to her as Miss Wednesday to her true self bonding with the Straw Hats in Little Garden was like night and day. The switch from villain to kind-hearted princess feels so well done that it almost feels like a completely different person. I also think that Luffy and Vivi's actors have insanely good chemistry. From the first interrogation scene to them exploring Little Garden together, the comedy just flows so easily. And the scene of them riding the dinosaur together and talking just feels so natural. A viewer might be led to believe that it's set up for romance later down the line. Chopper was always going to be the biggest question mark for me, and I'm sure many people, but they knocked it out of the park. You quickly adjust to CGI Chopper, and he's genuinely cute, heartwarming, and draws your sympathy very easily. Michaela Hoover does a great voice acting job here, but most importantly overall is the entire crew's chemistry with one another. This group just flows so well, they genuinely feel like friends, down to the little things like seeing them play with snowballs at the end of Drum Kingdom. As long as this show has this cast of characters at its core, it is always going to be enjoyable to watch. But now that we've covered the crew, I have to shout out some major contributors this season. Lyra Abova is the perfect Miss All Sunday. She commands every scene she's in, definitely a force of personality. But beyond that, I want to shout out several actors who I think actually elevated their characters above their anime and manga counterparts. David Dastmalchian made for a seriously sinister Mr. 3, way more of a compelling villain than in the original. But he was somehow arguably upstaged by Sophia Anna Caruso as Miss Golden Week of all people. Like, what a diabolical sociopathic performance. Then we had Brendan Murray as Brogy. This dude was genuinely born to play a giant or something. Every sentence he spoke was gold. The voice that he put on really felt like a giant, like an ogre, and he straight up had some of the best lines in the show. Julia Rewald is a way more fun version of Tashigi, as this endearingly enthusiastic sword nerd, whereas the anime and manga version of Tashigi tends to annoy me at points with her whininess and general ineptitude. But all of those actors aside, Straw Hats aside, hidden gems aside, I have to put one actor on a pedestal above all others this season, and that is Mark Herelick as Hiruluk. What the hell? Where did they find this guy? He straight up carried an entire episode from start to finish just talking to a CGI reindeer in a hut. This man took dialogue that was potentially corny at points and delivered it with so much raw, real emotion and made it feel genuine and authentic in a way that absolutely needed to land to make the entire finale of the season work. He was never over the top, but he never undersold the sincerity that was needed for a big emotional character like Hiruluk to hit. He is single-handedly the reason that episode 7 is not only the best episode of the season, but the best episode of the entire live-action show so far. It is the only episode that shows a glimpse of the real potential dramatic power that this show can have. Unfortunately, this show's stellar cast is in a constant battle against its scene direction and many of its writing choices and points that prevent the show from consistently reaching the highs that it is capable of. So the two biggest problems that stand out with most of the One Piece live action scenes are, first and foremost, that almost all the sets look and feel somewhat cheap. A problem that only gets worse in Season 2 as the Straw Hats are now going to grander and grander locations. So this is an observation that was mentioned to me, and now I can't get it out of my head. A lot of sets and costumes in this show feel like the children's show Lazy Town. Seriously, so much of the brilliant built-up emotional momentum from Hiruluk's scenes with Chopper went completely out the window for me when Hiruluk leaves the hut and enters Wapple's throne room for his quote-unquote grand death. The problem is that the show is trying to carry that intense, grounded emotion from before into a Lazy Town set with Lazy Town characters. No one is saying that One Piece needs to have Game of Thrones level sets, but for a show with this much money and this much viewership behind it, why does everything feel so artificial? And yes, the whole world and feel of the One Piece live action is supposed to be campy, but the problem is that there are still some scenes where the show obviously wants to be taken seriously, and where it does want viewers to feel serious emotions. And that doesn't work when everything looks decidedly unserious. But this could all be saved with strong scene direction, and this is the second major issue, which is that I believe that the first season got away with some cheap looking visuals at points because it presented it all with intentional style. The scene direction got me as the viewer to buy into a stylized world, but I don't know what the hell has happened with season 2's direction. All sense of visual style in terms of how scenes are presented to us is gone. Note, I am not referring to action scenes here, because the One Piece live action has significantly cooler action scenes than pretty much any other TV show out there. I mentioned Game of Thrones before, the premier action fantasy show of all time, and Game of Thrones' action choreography is generally terrible compared to One Piece's. The One Piece cast, notably Makinyu and Taz Skylar, actually know how to do fight scene choreography, which immediately puts One Piece's action miles ahead of most other shows. And the scene direction there tends to match. Zoro's battle against the 100 bounty hunters in particular was very creatively done, fighting up multiple levels with rope bridges and such involved. You're not gonna find that in another live action TV show today. But then, when we step away from action scenes, it's like, what the hell happened? What was lost from season 1 in terms of scene direction? Because season 1, while inconsistent with direction quality, did have a lot of dramatic scenes that were legitimately well directed. For example, Zoro and Nami taking drinks at Baratie had such a mature cinematic quality to the pacing and progression as the conversation got more and more real. Medium close-up shots building to close-up shots with overhead shots mixed in. Or this live-action original shot from Season 1 of Luffy's straw hat against the stars. Season 2 genuinely has none of that. Outside of fights, every single scene in Season 2 feels like it's presented as plainly as possible, and honestly amateurishly at points. The scene where Garp and Roger, the most mythologized character in the show so far, are having the conversation in the jail cell could not possibly be shot in a less exciting manner than what we got. It's practically shot like the two characters are on a theater stage, with Garp turning and laughing awkwardly to the audience at the end. There are a lot of scenes like that where there's just zero sense of weight to how the scene is shot, paced, or edited. I also think that's partly why episode 7 is so strong, because that is the episode that relies the least on scene direction and just allows Heroic actor to act in a small, simple set with simple shots. But lastly, what about the writing of this season? The Legends are here. This month, you can get our brand new collection, the Legends Poster Collection. 12 dynamically illustrated One Piece legends with 12 hidden iconic moments. Get Fiery Ace with his hidden Battle of Destiny. Get the Defiant Roger with his hidden legendary laugh. Or, for this month only, you can get Grinning Loki with a hidden tragedy, and many more. And this month, you can buy 2 posters and get any 3 free with the deal auto-applied at checkout. And that's not just from this collection. You can buy 2, get 3 from any posters you like, spanning all of our collections, including past boss posters, island posters, and ships posters. The buy 2, get 3 free deal is only running for this month, and Loki's poster will be gone from our store forever after this month, so make sure you get your deal today by hitting the link in the description below. So to start with, in terms of humor, I think there is some cringe Netflix humor. I mean, already within the first episode, you have a character saying awkward, and then there are a lot of dick and boner jokes for some reason. But beyond that, I'd say there are a lot of really funny lines and interactions overall. This season does regularly make me laugh and smile for sure. This season also does genuinely make me cry, with the scene of Chopper finding out that he poisoned Heroic, and their entire relationship is just beautifully done. And the season has some phenomenal lines that it pulls pulls out, like Brogy telling Usopp that fear means that you care. We've all heard a lot of lines in fiction at this point about different variations of what it means to be brave, but I think that line about fear was a unique line that I hadn't heard before, that works perfectly for Usopp where he is at his stage in his character growth. Usopp's entire character arc and Chopper and Hiriluk's tragedy are the two high points writing-wise this season. But a surprisingly brilliant decision was also how Laboon's storyline was handled. Low-key, my favorite scene of the season is Luffy's song and dance to befriend Laboon, which is far, far better than just fighting him like in the source material. And the connection between Luffy and Laboon is even better thought out in the live action, with Luffy paralleling their experiences, with Shanks having left Luffy, but Luffy having found new friends in the Straw Hat Pirates, just as the Rumbar Pirates left Laboon, but Laboon has found a new friend in Crocus. Framing the Crocus and Laboon storyline in that light is really poignant storytelling. It's a very fresh approach from the live action that I appreciate, and if I were a blind viewer never having read or watched the One Piece manga or anime before, I think watching that Laboon episode would have really surprised me at how quickly I came to care about this whale and the old man. Overall, I think writing-wise this season's highs surpass those of season 1, which is again why I'm so disappointed with the drop-off in scene direction, since this season definitely had the potential to make that leap to great TV show, in my opinion, if it could just execute on the drama that the story is feeding it better. That said, I do still think there were some writing missteps. For example, I believe the Roger Garp scene where Roger entrusts his son to Garp is included at the start of the season because it's meant to parallel the end of the season where Hiriluk entrusts his son to Kureha. But it's a somewhat forced parallel in my opinion, and that Roger Garp scene really doesn't fit in well with the overall plot of the season. I also think that Sanji's scene recounting his past to Nami, while very well performed by Taz Skylar, is just extremely out of place and completely shoehorned in. If I was a live-action viewer only, I'd be like, why the hell was this included in the final draft of the script of this episode? Because there is almost no congruence with the rest of the episode. Not with the themes or the overall dramatic and ongoing character conflicts of the Drum Kingdom arc. It just felt like Sanji needed to be thrown a bone. There was also another very forced segment where Usopp gets mad at Zoro in Drum Kingdom after what is implied to have been some anxiety that was brewing among the heroes, but we just jump into Usopp snapping at Zoro without really seeing any tension build. Like Usopp in the scene starts by yelling at Zoro for asking questions, when Zoro literally doesn't even ask a question. And then the biggest issue with the Drum Kingdom plot, and this is likely a budget thing so it's somewhat understandable, is that there's just so much telling instead of showing. We are told that this kingdom needs to be healed, that the hearts of the people need to be saved over and over, but we never really see any of this at all. Our first real look at the citizens is them fighting and defeating Wapple's monsters, so the overall concept of needing to save and heal the hearts of the people of the kingdom isn't really shown well in my opinion. Hopefully more time can be spent on establishing that in Alabasta, because it will be truly important there. So all in all, One Piece Season 2 had higher highs than Season 1. It has a more powerful overarching narrative that effectively builds the escalating conflict over the course of the season. The cast's chemistry is better than ever, the fights are better than ever. I just can't help but feel that the show still lacks the polish in set design, scene direction, and writing that the best shows of today have. This show will, of course, always be successful because of the huge base of One Piece fans behind it, and as a One Piece fan, I myself still really love the show. But if I were not a prior One Piece fan, if I were watching this with no attachment to the source material, my review would likely be that I enjoy this show enough to keep watching, but I would categorize it under guilty pleasure. That being said, I do believe all the potential is there for Season 3 with Alabasta to be the one where the show takes the leap from guilty pleasure to a genuinely masterful action-adventure fantasy epic. So let's see if third time's the charm. But let me know in the comments below how you like this season, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear the complete review of all points that I had to cut from this video, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.